Hi again. So now what I want to do is focus on what your place of birth options are, and also some of the evidence that informs us about why we offer certain place of birth for certain women. Um, what I want to bring your attention to first of all though is our Welcome to Powys Maternity Services leaflet, which hopefully every single one of you has had as part of the booking pack information at the beginning of your pregnancies. If you haven't already read this leaflet, I would urge everybody to have a look at this because it's got a fountain of information in it that can really help, particularly when planning around what you might want to do when it comes to giving birth and where you might want to have the baby. Also, just to remind everybody that on the front page of this leaflet is our call centre number for everybody within Powys, and you can ring this number at any time, 24/7, 7 days a week, when you think that either your waters have gone or you might be going into labour. And on a later video, I will talk to you in more detail about other reasons why you might want to ring us if you think your labour's starting. So, just to give you some information about place of birth statistics. Now, there was a big study that was done back in 2011 and 2012, which looked at the outcomes for thousands and thousands of women and babies across the whole of the UK, to look at what their outcomes were and what those outcomes were compared to where they gave birth. So the evidence was looking at women that gave birth in obstetric and labour ward environments. So that's in our bigger hospitals, district general hospitals, where there are obstetric facilities, where there are epidural analgesia, where there are paediatric facilities. It also looked at women and babies' outcomes when they gave birth in midwife-led birth centres. Now, it's important to understand that there are two types of midwife birth centre. There is an alongside birth centre, which is a midwife-led unit that is attached to a bigger hospital but is separate from the main labour ward. And then there are freestanding midwife-led birth centres, which are the type of birth centre that we have in Powys, that are completely separate from any kind of big hospital site, because obviously in Powys we don't have a district general hospital. And it also compared the outcomes to women and babies when they birthed at home as well. So I just want to again reiterate that by looking in this leaflet you will be able to see the full statistics and evidence around this place of birth study that was done. But what I do want to do now is just give you some of what I would class as the most important statistics for you, so that you can hopefully be able to make an informed decision about where you feel is the right place for you to give birth. So the study, as I've said, compared thousands of women in different birth settings. So I want to give you the outcomes for the women first, and then in a minute we'll talk about the outcomes for the babies. Now, the study also looked at women having their first babies separately to women having subsequent babies. So let's talk about women having their first babies first and what the study tells us. So if women go into labour and they're having their first baby, and also what's important to understand is this study is looking at women who are healthy, low risk in their pregnancy without any other complications going on for them or their babies. Okay, so for women who are low risk, midwife-led care, starting their labour in an obstetric labour ward environment, only 46% of women achieved a normal birth without some kind of intervention, which meant that 54% of women, so that's over half, were having some kind of intervention in their labour. Now, an intervention could be epidural, it could be induction or augmentation of your labour, so that's giving you hormone drips to speed things up. It could be a forceps or ventouse birth, or it could be an emergency caesarean section. So let's now look at mums having their first babies who are low risk and having a baby in an alongside midwifery-led unit. Now remember, we don't have alongside midwifery-led units in Powys. However, 62% of women were achieving a normal birth without intervention, and 38% of women were needing some form of intervention in their labour. Then we go to women having their babies in a freestanding midwife-led unit. So that's what we have in Powys. suddenly 70% of women are having their babies without intervention, and 30% of them are having some form of intervention in labour. And then when we look at women having a home birth, very similar statistics to those having a freestanding midwife-led unit birth. 67% of women are having their babies without intervention, and 33% are having some form of intervention. So when you look at those statistics for first-time mums, the closer you are to a obstetric unit, the more chance there seems to be of needing some form of intervention in labour. Looking at mums having second or subsequent baby, if they were having their baby within a labour ward setting, and again they are low risk in their pregnancy, 70% of these women were achieving a normal birth without intervention, 30% would need some support. Suddenly, when they are in a midwife-led unit that is freestanding, 95% of women are having a normal birth without intervention, and 5% are needing some support. And with home birth for women having subsequent babies, 96% of women were having a baby without intervention, and 4% were needing some support. So compare those, again, what we're seeing is that although overall statistics look much more supportive for women achieving a normal birth without intervention in all birth settings, there was still a big difference between women going straight to a labour ward compared to those coming either to a midwife-led unit or having a home birth. So hopefully when we start going through the anatomy and physiology of labour and birth and how it all works, hopefully you'll be able to understand a bit more about why those statistics might be. Looking at babies and their outcomes, because I think there'll be people out there that are thinking, well, okay, we might be allowing more women to achieve natural birth without intervention when they're not in a bigger hospital, but surely that's going to have some kind of effect on the outcomes of the babies. So what the study has found is, for women having their first babies, if they had their babies in an obstetric unit or in either type of birth centre, 995 babies would be born without having any problems or needing any help at the time of birth. And for women having their baby at home first time round, 991 were having a baby without any problems that was being born and breathing by themselves. So what we are finding is that really, when you look at the statistics, there's very few babies that are needing support when they're born, and it doesn't really seem to matter where that you're giving birth. There's always going to be a few that do need a bit of support. When you're looking at second or subsequent babies being born, again, the statistics were very, very positive for the outcomes for babies. Whether mums gave birth in an obstetric unit or in either type of birth centre, 997 babies were being born out of 1,000 without any complications and doing really well. And then for home births, 998 babies out of 1,000 were being born, again, without any complications. So when you look at all of that as a whole, out of 1,000 babies being born, the majority of them were absolutely fine, and there's always going to be a few that we need to either give a little bit of help to at birth or transfer in after the birth, and of course we're all trained midwives able to provide that first line support if needed. So all in all, the evidence does suggest that for babies it's just as safe for them in any birth setting, but for mums, the further away you are from an obstetric unit, the less likely you are to need an intervention in labour. And please can I reiterate that this evidence is about women that are low risk in pregnancy without having any complications, and they get to full term in their pregnancy. Again, if you feel like you want to discuss those statistics more with your own midwife, then please feel free to give them a ring. And they'll be able to discuss that further with you over the phone or at one of your appointments on a one-to-one basis. So on my computer I've just got a couple of slides just again to go through some of the benefits that you might want to look at with regards to place of birth. So we've got here birth settings at home. And again, this really is suitable for women that are low risk in pregnancy, and we are aware that women that have home births tend to have shorter labours, and they need less pain relief in their labour as well. And women feel much more relaxed in their own environment, and that tends to be why they're able to birth much quicker and with less need for analgesia. The next slide I want to show you is about midwife-led birth centres. So this slide in particular, I focused on the freestanding birth centre because that's what we offer in Powys. And this is kind of a halfway house for some women, because for some women they don't feel they want to be at home, and there are other women that would like to use a birthing pool. And in Powys, all of our birth centres except for Welsh Pool currently have a birthing pool setting. And I use this opportunity just to show you our birth centre here in Landod. You get an idea of what it looks like. So we aim for women to have an upright and mobile birth, and in one of our other sessions I'll talk to you about why that might be. So this is just to demonstrate a typical birthing pool that we would use, and we would actually fill the water to quite a high level so that when you're in the pool you're completely enveloped in the water, and that can definitely help with mobilisation and pain relief within labour as well. We do have either beds or we have birthing couches in all of our birth centres. So for those times when you feel like you want to rest a little bit and lay down, then there is that option for you. These beds are also really good for birth partners, for mums and for the new baby after the birth, to all be able to snuggle up together if you want to stay for a couple of hours before you go home. We use different tools as well to enable you to remain comfortable but to remain upright, and being upright in labour is really important, and I will talk about that more in a future video. So we have birthing balls here, we have something called a birthing stool, we also have various bean bags and also soft mats as well that you can use. Each of our birthing rooms as well has an ensuite, so there is a bathroom facility so that you can be able to use the bathroom, toilet and shower and things in peace without having to worry about other clients being around. And then of course we have got to talk about labour wards. So labour wards are really important places for women to give birth, and they are key for those women that might have an added complication in their pregnancy, whether it's for them or their babies. But there are ways and means to make sure that if you are on an obstetric labour ward, that you can be as mobile as possible, and we will discuss those in future videos. Also, when we're talking about pain relief, one of the things we will talk about is epidural analgesia, and if epidural is something that you did want for pain relief in labour, the only birth setting this would be available is on a labour ward. So that is the end of this session. As I said before, if you've got any questions about any of this, then please do speak to your midwives individually.